Hey homeschoolers, this is Jim Pence with See the Light, and today on Adventures in Digital Art, we're talking about masks. Hey, I'm glad you joined us today. We're talking about masks. Not the kind you put on your face, but the kind that'll let you do some creative effects, kind of like this one that's on the screen right now. We're going to talk about alpha lock or lock transparency. We're going to talk about layer masks, and we're going to talk about clipping masks. All three of those will give you some really versatile creative ability with digital art. Let's start with alpha lock. Alpha lock, I'm going to turn it on. I've got the word art written here. I'm going to bring up a layers panel. I'm working in Procreate, and I'm going to turn on alpha lock or lock transparency. Now I'm going to change the color that I have up there. Right now it's yellow, but let's go to a red. And as we go to red, I'm going to just start drawing, and I'm not going to pay much attention to where I'm drawing. I'm just going to start bringing the brush back and forth. And as you see, the only thing that changes are the letters. And that's because alpha lock prevents the app from drawing on anything other than something that's already there. So I can come in and I can do all sorts of things with these letters. And again, it's not only a lettering effect, it's just that's something that is kind of an easy way to demonstrate how this works. I'll show you a different thing to do a little bit later. Now if you turn alpha lock off, yeah, it doesn't work. So I'm going to turn it back on. I just wanted to show you how that worked. Now I'm going to change colors, and we're going to throw a little blue in here. And I'm going to just start out with some stripes just like I did before, but that's not particularly pretty, so I'm going to go ahead and color that all the way in so that we have a solid blue. But now I'm going to add a little bit of texture to the letters themselves, and I'm going to open up in Procreate my textures brushes, and let's choose a wood grain. And I'm going to change colors here to a kind of a light yellow-orange. And as I go over the letters now, I'm adding a little wood grain to those letters. And again, it doesn't draw on the background unless I turn off alpha lock. And if I turn off alpha lock and then continue to draw with that same brush, you'll see there it goes. Now with alpha lock off, if I try to draw with that same brush again, it's not going to work. So I'm going to delete that and turn alpha lock back on. So you can have a lot of fun just creating different effects. And if you want to do something a little different, I'm going to get off of the wood grain here and go back to actually I'm going to go to a hard airbrush, but I think I'll choose a larger one. Because what I want to do, one thing I really enjoy doing is planets and space pictures. And that isn't particularly what I wanted. Let's try this. It's kind of a yellow we'll go with. And that's too big, so let me shrink it down just a little bit. And that's about right. Now, I'm going to turn on Alpha Lock again. But with this layer, with Alpha Lock on, instead of adding stripes or wood grain, I'm going to use my airbrush, and I'm going to kind of begin to shade this so that I can give it more of a planet feel. So I'm going to darken the color a little bit. I'm going to adjust the size of my brush and take down the opacity a little bit, and then come around and just begin to give it a little bit more of a spherical shape. And by slowly darkening just bits and pieces, I will eventually get a planet type look. And again, the nice thing about Alpha Lock is that I don't have to worry about going outside the lines. I don't have to worry about cleaning up the edges. I can focus pretty much on getting the sphere to look the way it's supposed to look. I'm going to get a little highlight on this side. And maybe a little bit brighter just on that one side there. And I've got a decent sphere. I would play with it more. Excuse me, it's allergy season in North Texas. Let me switch over to some of my space brushes, and I'm going to take a little nebula brush, which also works really great for kind of creating a feel for clouds on a planet. So I'm going to just throw some of those in there just to make it interesting. And that is a little demonstration of how to do a planet. Oops, when I turn the other layer back on, the planet is behind or in front of the letters, but I just rearranged the layer and the letters are now in front of the planet. So that's Alpha Lock. Now let's consider something called a clipping mask. Now clipping masks in some respects are similar to Alpha Lock, but they do a little bit more. So I added a layer above the word art, and I've turned on clipping mask. Now it's going to let me do, again, much the same thing as Alpha Lock did. I'm going to change my colors a little bit, and I'm going to go for some texture this time. Let's see what we've got to work with. Not going to do wood grain, we're going to use grunge this time. And I'm going to just gently and lightly go over the letters. Again, that's pretty similar to what went on with Alpha Lock. So what's the difference? Why do we have a clipping mask? Well, I'm going to add a second clipping mask here. And to do that, I have to add another layer. And I recorded this before I did the voiceover. Eventually I add the layer. There it is. So I add the other layer. And now I'm going to turn on the clipping mask. And let's change things a little bit. Let's go for a blue. And how about a different texture this time? Don't want wood grain. How about cylinders or bubble kind of look? So I'm going to come in on my other layer and I'm laying in those bubbles. And so now I've got really two layers with clipping masks that are letting me decorate that that word art. Now, that's one thing that you can't, you can do that part with just lock transparency, but what you can't do is you can't treat those two things, the magenta decoration I did first and the circles second. You can't treat those separately. They're bound together if you just use alpha lock. Here, I'm changing the color of the circles a little bit. Maybe going for a darker feel or a lighter feel. There we go. I like that. So using clipping masks allows me a little bit more control when I really want to begin to tweak and work with some of the details in my art. And again, I'm working with text, but text isn't the only thing you can use this on. I will use masks often if I'm doing paintings or drawings or illustration. So you'll see that as we go on. So let's continue to see what we've got here. Okay, I lost track of where I was. Now we're going to be looking at layer masks. That's the third thing. First was alpha lock, then was clipping masks, and third was layer masks. So I had the word art. I added a layer mask in. A layer mask is kind of like laying something on top of the piece of art. And then I'm going to draw on it, but I can only use white or black. And as I use black, it looks like I'm erasing the word. But I'm really not, because black simply masks or hides whatever is underneath it. If I turn to white, then I can come back and I can again reveal what is underneath the mask. And in this case, it's that same word, art. Now, if you use gray instead of black or white, then it's going to give you sort of a translucent look. It's going to adjust the opacity. And again, opacity isn't something we've covered yet, but we will. But what it's going to do is, instead of either being there or not there, it is going to let me do some other things. So I'm going to come in, I'm drawing with black right now, and so I've hidden about half of those letters, and now I'm drawing in gray, and as I draw in gray, it's going to bring some of that back. Now I don't like what I did here because it muted the yellow too much, so I'm going to take that back out. It's a wonder of digital art, is the undo process. I'm going to make that gray a little lighter, and I'm going to turn down the opacity on the brush, and now I'm going to come back in. And so I am restoring some of that yellow, but now it kind of looks like it's in shadow, and there are, maybe it's in front of some blinds or something, and the blinds are letting the sunlight through. So that is a layer mask. And again, there are a lot of things that you can do with a layer mask that we will begin to look into in succeeding episodes. But just wanted to give you a feel for how it works. And you can tweak it, you can have a lot of fun with it, you can do all sorts of things playing with layer masks. I'm going to come back in with white again, and let's bring this back. There we go, all the way. So we've got our word art back. So those are the three kinds of masks that we have used: alpha lock, clipping masks, and layer masks. Now let's do a little project to kind of see how this works. I've got the word sunset written up there, and we're going to create that effect that was on the screen at the beginning. I've got the word sunset already, so I'm going to, first of all, I've turned on alpha lock, or I'm turning on alpha lock right now, and once I have alpha lock on, I'm going to play with the colors of the letters a little bit. Since it's going to be illustrating a picture of a sunset, or since the graphics or the letters are going to be in a picture of a sunset, I'd like the letters color to kind of reflect the idea of a sunset. So I'm going to go back to a soft brush, and I'm going to reduce the size a little bit, and I'm going to turn the opacity down. And now let's start to create more of a sunset feel. So I'm going to turn to a little darker yellow-orange and bring that across. Let's adjust that color just a little bit. I'm going to leave the bottoms of the letters a little brighter, but as I get up higher, I'm going to go to more of a red-orange, because if you look at a sunset, that's kind of how it goes. It's yellow toward the bottom, goes to orange, red-orange, red, and then ultimately violet, and then black, but we won't go that far. I'm going to come over now into violet and hit a little bit of the top of the letters. And let's darken that a little bit. Now remember, I'm using Alpha Lock right now, or Lock Transparency. There are quite a few apps that have this, so even though I'm working on an iPad with Procreate, you should be able to find apps that will enable you to do this. I'm coming into the bottom, or I've come into the bottom a little bit, brightened up the bottom. Okay, so that's the first part. Now, let's add a picture in. The picture I'm going to add, after I've turned Alpha Lock off, the picture I'm going to add is a sunset picture that I took a couple of years ago from the front of our property here in North Texas. So you're going to get a nice North Texas sunset. And what I'm going to do is, most apps have a way to import pictures, and I've already saved this one to my iPad, so I'm just going to pull that in. And now that it has come in, it comes in, the image comes in as its own layer. So I'm going to deselect it. We're going to talk about selection next week or next time, and I'll show you how that works. But I've deselected the layer, but what I want to do is I want to move the photo underneath the word sunset, so that the word sunset shows up. So let's switch that around. There we go. Now that looks kind of cool, but let's go ahead and add in a layer mask. I'm not going to need a clipping mask, but I'm going to add a layer mask in. And then I'm going to do something called inverting it, which means I'm turning it black instead of white, so that none of the layer is able to be seen. And now that the word sunset is hidden but still there, I'm going to come back in with white, and I'm going to start to selectively reveal that word sunset. So I'm going to use my soft brush, and again turn down the opacity, and I'm going to just begin to come in and slowly reveal the letters. Now what I'm going to do is leave some of the letters out and try to do it in a way that it looks like they're going behind the clouds. Now if I was actually doing this for, say, a client or something like that, or something that I wanted to publish, then I would spend a lot more time than I'm doing here, and I would make my brush a lot smaller, and I would really sculpt these letters so that they actually look like they are behind the clouds. I'm just kind of creating the illusion for the purposes of our little lesson today. But still, it's fairly easy to just come in and draw enough to give the feel that at least some of those letters are kind of hiding behind the clouds. Now, as I come back in and strengthen the tops of the letters there, I noticed that there was a problem, and the problem is on the right side of the picture. The one branch that's coming down is kind of hidden behind the letter T. Well, the problem is if the letters are supposed to be behind and over by the clouds, then those branches should be visible. So I go back to black, and I'm going to make this a lot bigger. And again, if I were taking a lot of time and trying to do this with precision, then I would make my brush a lot smaller, and I would work with it until the black branches didn't have, they have kind of a dark halo around them, where I've had to cover or uncover them again. But I'm using the black to hide that part of the letter that's in front of the branches. And again, I could spend some time and go into a lot more detail, but not going to be able to do it this time. But that's in a nutshell how you work with something like lettering or even other artwork, as we'll see in some succeeding projects as we do some practical exercises with some of these different aspects of and characteristics of digital art software. But still, we have a nice sunset there with the word sunset below it. And that's pretty much going to do it today. Next week, we're going to be talking about selection. And it's another great aspect of digital art that will let you fix your mistakes instead of having to erase them. And I'll show you how that works next week. I hope you've enjoyed this. Please like our video on YouTube. Please subscribe. And be sure to check back next week for more adventures in digital art. Thanks so much. I'm Jim Pence with See the Light.